Hello guys, and welcome to the Exoensive Coins History channel. There are coins sitting in old jars, tucked inside wallets worn thin with age, resting at the bottom of dusty shoeboxes in attics across America. And most people walk right past them every single day without a second glance. They see a quarter, just 25 cents, something to feed a parking meter or toss into a vending machine. But what if that coin, that one ordinary-looking silver circle you have been ignoring for years, was actually worth more than a brand new car? What if it was worth more than a down payment on a house? What if the coin you casually dropped into a tip jar last Tuesday was worth $139,000? That is not a fantasy. That is not clickbait. That is the real, documented, verified story of the 1965 Washington quarter dollar, one of the most misunderstood, most overlooked, and most financially explosive coins in all of American numismatic history. And today, we are going to walk through every single detail of this coin together, because knowledge is the difference between spending a fortune and keeping one. So stay with me. Whether you are a lifelong collector, someone who just inherited a coffee can full of old change, or simply a person who wants to understand why certain coins command jaw-dropping prices at auction, this video is going to change the way you look at every quarter in your possession from this moment forward. Let us go back in time. Let us go back to 1965 and understand what was happening in America, because the story of this coin cannot be told without understanding the chaos that gave birth to it. The United States in the mid-1960s was a country under extraordinary pressure. The economy was expanding rapidly. The population was growing, and coin-operated machines, vending machines, payphones, laundromats, jukeboxes were multiplying across every city and town in the country. The demand for coins, especially quarters, dimes, and half dollars, had grown to a level that the United States Mint simply could not keep pace with. There was a severe coin shortage gripping the nation, and it was causing real problems in everyday commerce at the same time. Something else was happening, something that would permanently alter the composition of American coinage. The price of silver was rising. For decades, American coins had been made with 90% silver content. A quarter was not just a quarter. It was a small piece of precious metal with actual intrinsic value. But as silver prices climbed, it became increasingly expensive for the government to produce coins that were worth more as raw metal than as currency. People began hoarding silver coins, melting them down, or simply pulling them out of circulation and holding on to them. The coin shortage got worse. Congress responded with the Coinage Act of 1965. This legislation fundamentally changed what American coins were made of. Starting that year, quarters and dimes would no longer contain silver. They would be made of a copper-nickel-clad composition, a core of pure copper sandwiched between outer layers of a copper-nickel alloy. The half dollar was reduced to only 40% silver, and within a few years, it too would lose its silver content entirely. This was a seismic shift in American monetary history, and the 1965 quarter was the first generation of coins produced under this new reality. Now here is where things get deeply fascinating. Because the transition from silver to clad was not seamless. It was not perfectly clean. The mint was operating under enormous pressure to produce coins as quickly as possible to alleviate the nationwide shortage. Multiple facilities were working around the clock, and in the middle of all that urgency, all that speed, all that industrial pressure, mistakes happened. Rare, extraordinary, historically significant mistakes. The most important of those mistakes is the reason we are here today. During the transition period, some 1965 quarters were accidentally struck on silver planchets, the blank, disc-shaped pieces of metal that coins are stamped onto. Instead of being punched out of the new copper-nickel-clad material, a small number of planchets from the old 90% silver stock somehow made their way into the production process. The result was a coin that looks like a standard 1965 quarter at first glance, but is fundamentally different in its very substance. It is a coin that does not belong to its own era. It is a silver ghost wearing a modern face. These coins are known as transitional error coins, and they are among the most prized error varieties in all of American coin collecting. The 1965 silver quarter is not just a mistake. It is a historical artifact. It is physical proof of one of the most turbulent and consequential transitions in the history of United States coinage. And because it was a mistake, an unintentional relic of a dying era, almost none of them survived. Most were melted down before anyone realized what they had. Many were spent without a second thought. The ones that remain are extraordinarily rare. Oh, how do you know if you have one? This is the question that matters most, and it is the one that drives thousands of people to examine their pocket change with new eyes every single time a video like this reaches them. And that is exactly why you should pay close attention to what comes next. The most reliable method for identifying a 1965 silver quarter is through weight. A standard clad quarter weighs 5.67 grams. A silver quarter from before 1965 and any silver transitional error from 1965 weighs 6.25 grams. That difference of less than 1 gram might seem insignificant in daily life, but in the world of coin identification, it is everything. If you have a precise digital scale, the kind used for jewelry or food portioning, you can test any 1965 quarter you come across. If it weighs 6.25 grams, you may be holding something extraordinary. The second method involves sound. Silver coins produce a distinctly different ring when dropped or tapped compared to clad coins. Drop a silver coin onto a hard surface, and you will hear a clear, bell-like tone that lingers for a moment. Drop a clad coin, and the sound is flatter, duller, more of a thud than a ring. This is not a definitive test on its own, but it is a useful first indicator, and seasoned collectors develop an ear for it over time that becomes almost instinctive. The third method is edge examination. Look at the edge of the coin, the side, the thin band that runs around the perimeter. On a standard clad quarter, you will see a visible reddish-brown copper stripe running through the middle of the edge. That is the copper core showing through. On a silver coin, there is no such stripe. The edge is uniformly silver in appearance all the way through. If your 1965 quarter has a completely uniform silver edge with no copper line, that is a significant sign that something unusual may be happening with that coin. Now, it is important to be clear about something. Finding a 1965 quarter that passes these initial tests does not automatically mean you have a certified silver transitional error worth 6 figures. There are other explanations that need to be ruled out. Some coins have been plated or altered over the years. Some scales are not accurate enough for this kind of measurement. What these tests tell you is whether a coin is worth sending to a professional grading service for authentication. Organizations like PCGS, the Professional Coin Grading Service, or NGC, the Numismatic Guarantee Company, are the gold standard for coin authentication. These are the bodies whose certified opinions drive the values you see at major auctions. A certified, authentic 1965 Washington quarter struck on a silver planchet, a genuine transitional error, is a coin that has achieved prices at auction that would astonish most people. The documented, verified value for one of these rare error coins in exceptional condition stands at $139,000. Let that settle in for a moment. $139,000. For a coin that entered the world as a simple quarter. For a coin that someone, somewhere, once used to buy a pack of gum. That number is not theoretical. It is not a collector's fantasy. It is the kind of price that gets realized when an extraordinarily rare coin meets a passionate, knowledgeable buyer at the right moment. And the reason it commands that price is rooted in everything we have been discussing: the history, the rarity, the accidental nature of the coin's existence, and the completeness of its story. This coin is not just old metal. It is a chapter in American history that almost did not survive. Every authenticated example is a survivor of improbable odds. Think about what the quarter with George Washington's portrait represents beyond its monetary value. Washington himself was famously opposed to putting living figures on currency, believing it too closely resembled the monarchy from which the United States had fought so hard to separate itself. When the Washington quarter was introduced in 1932, it was actually a redesign meant to commemorate the 200th anniversary of his birth. The irony that this coin, bearing the face of a man who resisted monarchical symbolism, would become one of the most valuable small coins in American history is not lost on those who appreciate the deeper currents of numismatic storytelling. The reverse of the 1965 quarter, designed by John Flanagan, shows the heraldic eagle, wings spread, arrows in one talon, an olive branch in the other. It is a design that speaks to the duality at the heart of American identity: the willingness to fight when necessary, the desire for peace when possible. That design, on a coin made in the wrong year from the wrong metal at the wrong time, carries a symbolic weight that goes well beyond its face value. That if you are someone who has been collecting coins casually for years, or if you have just started going through inherited collections, the 1965 Washington quarter demands your attention. Go through your quarters carefully. Check the dates. If you find a 1965, do not dismiss it. Weigh it. Listen to it. Examine its edge. And if anything seems unusual, do not spend it. Do not trade it. Do not store it loosely where it can be scratched or damaged. Put it in a protective holder and consult a professional. The cost of having a coin authenticated is minimal compared to what you might discover. The people who have found these coins and had them verified did not do so by accident. They did so because they knew what to look for. They did so because someone, at some point, took the time to explain why a certain coin from a certain year deserved a second look. That is what this video exists to do for you. The 1965 Washington quarter is not just a coin. It is a window into a moment when America was changing, when the very material of its money was being redefined, when the old world of silver and tradition was giving way to a new world of practicality and modernity. And in the middle of that transition, by accident, a few coins slipped through. Coins that belonged to both worlds at once, that were born in one era but stamped with the face of another. Those coins are out there. Some of them are still in circulation. Some of them are in your collection right now, waiting to be recognized. $139,000. That is what recognition looks like when it comes too late. Make sure it does not come too late for you. Now that you understand the extraordinary story of the 1965 Washington quarter, and now that you appreciate how a single coin can carry the weight of an entire era of American monetary history, I want you to hold that understanding close as we move forward. Because what comes next is equally powerful, equally rare, and equally capable of changing someone's financial life in a single moment of recognition. We are moving 30 years forward in time. We are stepping out of the turbulent 1960s and into the mid-1990s, a different America, a different set of pressures, a different kind of mistake, but the same breathtaking result. We are talking about the 1995 D Washington quarter dollar, and the story behind its staggering $46,000 value is one that every coin enthusiast, every casual collector, and every person who has ever reached into their pocket and pulled out a handful of change absolutely needs to hear. The year 1995 feels recent to many of us. For those in the 35 to 65 age range watching this right now, 1995 is not ancient history. It is memory. It is the mid-90s, a time of economic optimism, of cultural energy, of America feeling like it was entering a new golden age. The internet was just beginning to reach ordinary households. Cell phones were becoming real consumer products rather than luxury items for the wealthy. The country was riding a wave of prosperity, and the United States Mint was producing coins in enormous quantities to serve a booming economy and an expanding population. The Denver Mint, identified on coins by the small letter D stamped beneath the date, was one of the primary production facilities meeting this demand. Denver has a long and proud history in American coinage. Established in 1906, the Denver Mint grew out of the gold rush era of the American West and has been a cornerstone of coin production for over a century. Coins bearing the D Mint mark carry with them the spirit of that Western history. A reminder that the story of American money is not just an East Coast story, not just a Washington and Philadelphia story, but a continental one, stretching from the Atlantic to the Rockies. In 1995, the Denver Mint was operating at full capacity. Hundreds of millions of Washington quarters were being produced that year. And when you are talking about production numbers that large, when you are talking about machinery running continuously, workers managing enormous volumes of metal and dies and planchets, the conditions for rare and significant errors are always present beneath the surface. Most of those hundreds of millions of coins came out perfectly ordinary, but a very small number did not. A very small number came out as something else entirely, something that coin collectors would later fight passionately to own. The 1995 D Washington quarter that commands a value of $46,000 is a double die error coin. And to understand why a double die coin is so rare, so valuable, and so visually arresting, you need to understand a little bit about how coins are actually made. It is a process that most people never think about, but once you understand it, you will never look at a coin the same way again. Every coin begins with a master design. That design is transferred through a series of mechanical steps onto a working die, a hardened steel tool that is essentially a reverse image stamp of the coin's face. When the die is pressed against a blank metal planchet with tremendous hydraulic force, the design is transferred onto the metal, creating the finished coin. The critical point is this: before a working die is ready for production, it goes through a process called hubbing, in which the design is pressed into the die in multiple stages. If, during this hubbing process, the hub and the die shift even slightly between impressions, even a fraction of a millimeter, the resulting die will have a doubled image pressed into its surface. Every single coin produced by that die will then carry that doubling, that slight but visible ghosting or splitting of letters, numbers, and design elements on the 1995 D Washington quarter. This doubling manifests in ways that are visible to a careful, attentive eye. The date shows doubling. The lettering shows doubling. In certain high-grade examples, the details of Washington's portrait show the telltale signs of a die that was not perfectly aligned during its creation. It is not a flaw in the sense of damage or wear. It is a flaw in the manufacturing process itself, a structural error baked into the die before the first coin was ever struck, meaning that every coin produced from that particular die carries the same characteristic. It is, in the truest sense, a production error that became a historical artifact. Now, here is what makes the 1995 D double die quarter particularly compelling beyond just the mechanics of its creation. By 1995, the coin collecting community in the United States had become sophisticated and well-organized in ways it had not been in 1965. Publications dedicated to error coins were circulating widely. Collector organizations were actively cataloging known varieties. The Internet, while still in its infancy as a consumer tool, was beginning to allow collectors to share information and compare findings in real time. This meant that when the 1995 D double die quarter was identified, word spread through the numismatic community with a speed and intensity that earlier eras simply could not have matched. But here is the paradox that makes this coin's story so interesting. Despite that awareness, despite the growing community of collectors actively looking for exactly this kind of variety, the 1995 D double die quarter remained extraordinarily difficult to find. Why? Because the doubling on this coin, while genuine and significant, is subtle enough that it does not announce itself to the casual observer. It does not leap out at you the way some error coins do. It requires attention. It requires the right lighting. It requires either magnification or a trained eye that has looked at enough coins to recognize when something is slightly, beautifully, importantly off. This is the nature of the most valuable coins in American numismatic history. They are not always the ones screaming for attention. They are often the quiet ones, the coins that reward patience and knowledge with revelations that change everything. The 1995 D double die quarter is exactly that kind of coin. It sat in circulation, passed through hands, was spent and deposited and recirculated, and almost no one noticed. The ones that were noticed, pulled out of circulation by collectors sharp enough to recognize them, authenticated by professional grading services, and preserved in protective holders. Those are the coins that now command prices that leave people genuinely speechless at $46,000. That is the documented value of a 1995 D Washington quarter dollar in high grade, certified condition showing the double die variety. $46,000 for a coin that was minted by the hundreds of millions. $46,000 for a coin that the person who first spent it almost certainly believed was worth exactly 25 cents. The mathematics of that are almost impossible to process intuitively. We are talking about a coin that has appreciated in value by a factor of 184,000. If you had set aside $46,000 in 1995 and simply put it in a savings account, you would have far less than $46,000 worth of purchasing power today after accounting for inflation. But if you had recognized and preserved the right quarter, just one specific quarter out of hundreds of millions, you would have something worth 46,000 modern dollars. That is the power of numismatic knowledge. That is the power of knowing what to look for. Let us talk specifically about how you identify a potential 1995 D double die quarter. The process begins, as it almost always does, with the date. Pick up any 1995 quarter, and check for the D mint mark directly below and slightly to the right of the date. If that D is present, you have a Denver Mint coin, and that is your starting point. If there is no mint mark, the coin was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, which did not produce the double die variety in question. Once you have confirmed the D mint mark, examine the date itself under magnification. A loupe, a small magnifying lens used by jewelers and collectors, with at least 5 times magnification is ideal, though 10 times will give you an even clearer view. Look at each digit of the date. In a genuine 1995 D double die quarter, you should be able to see slight doubling, a shadow, a secondary impression, a ghosting effect, most prominently in the digits. The doubling is not always dramatic. It is not always immediately obvious. But with good magnification and proper lighting, it becomes visible to anyone who knows what they are looking for. Next, examine the lettering on the obverse, the front face of the coin bearing Washington's portrait. The motto, the designation of the coin, the inscriptions that we have all seen so many times we stopped reading them years ago. Look at those letters closely. In a double die example, those letters will show the same slight doubling visible in the date. The text will have a subtle but real thickness, a slight splitting at the edges of the letters that is not present on a normal coin. It is also worth examining the portrait itself, the features of Washington's face, the definition of his jaw, the rendering of his hair. In higher-grade examples of the double die variety, some of these facial details show the influence of the die doubling as well. This is where the difference between a common coin and a potentially significant one can be most dramatically illustrated, because the portrait of George Washington on this quarter is rendered with enough detail that doubling, even subtle doubling, affects its visual character in ways that become more apparent the more carefully you look. If your examination raises any suspicion that you may have found a double die example, the next step is absolutely critical, and it is the same advice we gave. For the 1965 silver quarter, do not spend it, do not clean it, do not store it loosely, and do not try to sell it without authentication. Cleaning a coin, even with something as gentle as a soft cloth, can permanently reduce its grade and therefore its value by thousands of dollars. The natural surface of a coin, even one that appears dirty or dull, is part of its historical record. Professional graders evaluate that surface as part of their assessment, and a coin that has been cleaned, however gently, will never achieve the highest grades that command the highest prices. Submit the coin to a professional grading service. PCGS and NGC are the two most respected names in the industry, and both offer detailed authentication services that will tell you definitively whether your coin is a genuine double die variety. The certification holder they return the coin in serves as its passport, its documented identity in the world of serious numismatics. A certified 1995 D double die quarter in its holder is a coin that any serious collector or dealer in the world will immediately recognize and respect. There is something deeply human about the story of coins like these. They are objects that pass through countless hands, carried in pockets alongside keys and receipts, tossed into change jars at the end of long days, dropped onto countertops in 1,000 ordinary transactions. They were witnesses to the daily lives of ordinary Americans, to grocery runs and coffee purchases and parking meters and birthday money given from grandparent to grandchild. And somewhere in all of that ordinary passage, they retained something extraordinary. A mistake, an error, a tiny, permanent record of a moment when a machine did not do exactly what it was supposed to do. That is why error coins carry such emotional weight for collectors. They are not just financially valuable. They are philosophically interesting. They are proof that perfection is impossible even in the most controlled industrial processes. They are reminders that accidents can create beauty, rarity, and value in ways that intention never could. No one at the Denver Mint in 1995 set out to create a coin worth $46,000. They set out to create a quarter. But in the gap between intention and execution, something extraordinary was born. There is a lesson in that for all of us, and it extends well beyond coin collecting. Value is not always found where we expect it. It is not always loud or obvious or labeled. Sometimes it is sitting quietly in a change jar on a kitchen counter, waiting for the one person who knows enough to recognize it. Sometimes it is in a shoebox of old coins that belong to a grandparent, inherited with no particular expectation of significance. Sometimes it is in your wallet right now, a 1995 quarter with a D mint mark and a date that has been doubled by a die that was ever so slightly misaligned on a day decades ago in a mint in Denver, Colorado. The 1965 Washington quarter and the 1995 D Washington quarter are separated by 30 years of American history. They were born of different pressures, different technologies, different circumstances. One is a silver ghost that survived a transition between monetary eras. The other is a doubled image, a mechanical echo, pressed into metal by a die that was not quite right. But they share something essential. They share the quality of being rare, being authentic, being irreplaceable records of specific moments in the long and complex story of American coinage. And they share the ability to transform someone's understanding of an object they once considered utterly ordinary. $139,000 for the right 1965 quarter, $46,000 for the right 1995 D quarter. Those are not lottery numbers. Those are not promises. They are documented realities that exist because knowledge, patience, and attention can unlock value that the rest of the world is walking past every single day. Go check your coins. Weigh them, examine them, hold them up to the light. Look at them with fresh eyes and new understanding. Because somewhere out there, possibly closer than you ever imagined, one of these coins is waiting to be found by exactly the right person at exactly the right moment. Make sure that person is you.